Thank you for staying with us. We continue here. First-year computer science students Joel Cedars as well as Veer Gosai from Stellenbosch University have uncovered a major fraud scheme involving Sassa's Social Relief of Distress grant. During their investigation into the vulnerabilities in the government system, they also found numerous unexplained applications as well as payments made. Shockingly, even their own ID numbers were misused. For this discussion, I am joined by Siyanda Baduza, who's a basic income researcher at the Institute for Economic Justice. Siyanda, good to have you on the program this afternoon. Firstly, can you share us your insights onto how these students at Stellenbosch University uncovered the fraud related to the SRD grant? What were the key findings of the investigation?
Well, from what I understand is they were able to generate and test a number, generate a number of ID numbers and test that on Sassa's system. So see how many of these ID numbers had active applications. And what they found was that there were thousands of these ID numbers went through and said that there were active applications. But when they checked it with birth rates from Sassa, Stats, using that data, they found that it would be coverage of around 90% of all 18 and 19-year-olds in the country who would have applied for the SRD grant, which is definitely unrealistic. And from there, they were able to conclude that it likely indicates that most of those applications were fraudulent.
With this said, the investigation also reveals an alarming application rate for people born specifically in February of 2005. What does this statistic indicate about just the scale of fraudulent applications in the SRD grant?
So I think it's a little nuanced. So I think it definitely shows that something suspicious is definitely happening in the 18 to 19 age group. So for people who have just turned 18, there's something happening in their applications. But even in their article, they also do the same type of calculation for the other age groups. And there, they don't see coverage levels at around the same level. There, it's more around 52%. Which, as far as we know, and with expert estimates of the eligible populations and how many people are living in poverty in the other age groups, that's more realistic. So really the concerning age group cohort that they found is definitely in that 18 to 19 range.
From what we know so far, Siyanda, how has the South African Social Security Agency responded to these findings? And if any, what measures are they currently being implemented to address this issue?
So from the public interviews that they've done, I know that Sassa, they took a stance of more saying that they aren't really shocked by this. They've known that something like this has been happening for a while. And one of the measures that they introduced, they say that they've introduced in the last couple of months to deal with these types of fraudulent applications has been the ID biometric verification system. So they use some type of algorithm to find people who have suspicious applications or people whom they suspect are victims of fraud. And the SRD grants for those people are blocked until they can prove their verification via facial recognition, which we have also pointed out is extremely discriminatory and ends up blocking out a lot of people who are actually deserving. And Sassa hasn't been upfront about the algorithm they use, and so how people are classified as suspicious or being victims of that fraud.
You make an interesting point, and I also want us to expand a bit on that. There are significant barriers for beneficiaries, like what we've highlighted, especially with the biometric verification process. How do these challenges indeed impact vulnerable populations, particularly those without access to technology?
I think the worst part about it is the people who are worst affected are those who are most in need of receiving this aid in the first place. So, for example, take the biometric verification that I just described. The way it works is the grant is blocked for a while until someone can complete this. But in order to do that, they would need access to a high-quality smartphone with a camera that's clear enough. They need good quality internet access. And as Sassa has now recently confirmed, they also need to have an ID smart card in order to be able to do this. So those with green ID books would need to go and apply for ID smart cards, which isn't free and also takes a long time. So before they can access their grants, and those grants are at risk of being even blocked or cancelled in the future. So the people who are most affected are those who are the most vulnerable, those who don't have a lot of like ease of access to digital platforms, which is concerning because for the SRD grant, Sassa has taken the stance of moving towards a more fully digital and fully automated platform, which isn't the same as like other grants. So people aren't even able to conduct any of their SRD grant affairs at Sassa offices in person, for example, which differs from other grants. So really the most disadvantaged and excluded are those who are already the poorest of the poor.
Siyanda, you mentioned that Sassa's fraud management system may be flawed, or at least that's what I'm summing up from what you're saying. What specific changes would you recommend to indeed improve its effectiveness, but also the transparency of the system?
I think the most principally at least without even getting into the technical details of it, is that Sassa has they've been very aggressive with their like digitization and full automation of the system. So as it is, there isn't any human oversight into these processes, which is how like something of this scale can happen. So just take this case that has been uncovered by these students. This type of fraud isn't something that would have happened had the applications been conducted in person or had there at least been some type of human oversight, because you can't, as one person, have multiple IDs. If there was a person who was overseeing that, they would have been able to verify it. So I think that they definitely need to tone down a bit on the enthusiasm to move towards fully automated systems. We still need some type of accountability and oversight and some flexibility, which I think even more is important when you consider that many are also excluded by these digital platforms beyond them just being vulnerable to fraud and corruption.
Siyanda, there are also concerns regarding the sharing of sensitive information, but also the implications for beneficiaries. In your view, how can Sassa ensure that personal data is indeed protected while also addressing concerns around fraud as well?
It's difficult again with like fully automated digital platforms because again, a lot of the processing of the data doesn't just happen at Sassa, it also happens at third parties. So even like looking at this case, if there were people who had, so if there were fraudulent applications, but also if those fraudulent applications went on to be like successful and approved, that means that whoever these fraudsters are would have also been able to open bank accounts using fraudulently accessed data. So the vulnerabilities definitely aren't just at Sassa. So if you consider then that it's Sassa, it's the third-party operators, it's the banks as well, and those are all the people who are handling beneficiary data. And if these are compromised, then it leaves them at risk on multiple levels, which is definitely concerning.
It would seem that efforts to prevent fraud may be also excluding legitimate applications from what you said earlier on. But how can Sassa then strike a balance between preventing fraud, but also ensuring that those in need indeed receive the support?
I think that the guiding principle to whatever solution that they come up with, technical solution, has to be that we do have to stamp out fraud and close whatever gaps exist in the system. But it also has to happen in a way that doesn't exclude people who are already like part of the system and who are deserving. And I think an easier way to do that is definitely to have some level of flexibility in the system. So allow people to go into Sassa offices and conduct their SRD grant applications in person. But even things like the appeals process for the SRD grant, which right now is incredibly flawed, because when someone is excluded from the grant, in the appeals process, they aren't allowed to submit any like new evidence to contextualize why they were wrongly excluded. So something like that also would definitely help to curb the level of people wrongly excluded. With the verification system, you could also just allow people to walk in and say, this is who I am, and those with green ID books to also be allowed to complete that. So I guess maybe the solutions aren't even that complicated. It's just introducing a level of oversight and accountability into the process.
Siyanda Baduza, thank you so much for shedding light on this critical issue especially of fraud within the SRD grant system. He's been helping us make sense of what has led to this kind of corruption that we're seeing there.